You are not here merely trying to survive your life. You are participating in its creation. And the moment you begin to understand this, everything changes. Think about how much of your energy is wasted when you live in a state of urgency. Urgency is not simply moving quickly. It is an inner message that says, I need this now because I do not believe it will come later. Urgency carries the emotional signature of lack, fear, and unworthiness. It tells life, tells the universe, tells your own nervous system that you are not safe, not trusting, not aligned with the very thing you say you want. Calmness, by contrast, is a declaration of faith. It is the body's way of saying, I do not need to panic in order to receive. When you are calm, your whole physiology changes. Stress begins to lower. The survival centers in the brain soften. Creativity opens. Perception widens. You shift from the narrow tunnel vision where all you can see is the problem into a broader awareness where possibilities, solutions, and quiet guidance become visible. Calmness is not merely an emotional preference. It is a biological advantage. It changes your chemistry, which changes your energy, which changes how you meet reality. This is why calmness is the gateway to receiving. The moment you let go of tension, the moment you stop forcing outcomes, the moment you stop mentally rehearsing fear-based scenarios, that is often the moment life can finally deliver what has been trying to reach you. Imagine holding something tightly in your fist. The muscles are contracted, the hand is closed, nothing new can be placed there while it remains clenched. But the moment you open the hand, the moment tension releases, space appears. This is the energetic truth of calmness. Surrender is not losing control, it is releasing resistance. It is creating room for the new to arrive. When you surrender urgency and doubt, you create a kind of inner vacuum that life naturally fills with possibility. This is why the calmest people often seem to manifest effortlessly. It is not luck. It is not coincidence. They are simply not blocking the flow with nervousness, fear, or compulsive overthinking. They are open enough, aligned enough, and trusting enough to receive what may already be on its way. Calmness shifts you into another dimension of awareness. You begin to see that life is not merely happening to you, it is responding to you. You stop reacting from old emotional patterns and start responding from a place of conscious participation. You stop chasing and begin attracting. You stop doubting and begin allowing. The whole universe is built on rhythms, patterns, and frequencies. And calmness is one of the highest frequencies because it is the frequency of alignment, receptivity, and trust. It is the frequency of knowing that you are guided, supported, and not separate from what is meant for you. When you are calm, creative intelligence becomes available. You can feel the difference between acting from fear and acting from clarity. You begin to notice the subtle signs life sends, the intuitive nudges, the synchronicities, the unexpected ideas that seem to arrive from nowhere. These are often invisible when you are stressed, because stress narrows perception. But the moment you relax, they become obvious. Calmness is the doorway to intuition. When the nervous system is balanced, when the emotional state is steadier, when the mind is quiet enough to listen rather than react, you become a receiver for deeper guidance. You begin to move through life from flow rather than friction. You begin to sense what is right for you without needing to dissect every possibility into exhaustion. This is emotional stillness, the space where wisdom rises. People often misunderstand calmness. They think it means passivity, indifference, surrendering dreams, becoming lazy or inactive. But calmness is not a retreat from desire. It is the recognition that desire cannot be bullied into form. You do not receive what you want by forcing it into existence. You receive it by becoming the person aligned with it. Calmness is the emotional signature of someone who is already inwardly connected to the outcome. You do not need to beg life. You do not need to prove your worthiness. You do not need to fight your way into your future. You need to align. The calm person is not inactive. They are energetically precise. They understand that controlling the outer world is impossible, but bringing coherence to the inner world is deeply possible. They know the outer world often mirrors the quality of the state from which they live. So they choose their state first. They choose calmness not because it is always easy, but because it is intelligent. You cannot create a beautiful life from a chronically stressed mind. You cannot receive abundance from a fearful heart. You cannot build a genuinely new reality while holding tightly to the emotional identity of the old one. Calmness dissolves old emotional patterns. It disrupts the autopilot of worry, fear, and doubt. It breaks the cycle of meeting life the same way you always have. That is why calmness is transformative. It is the doorway to a new emotional identity, and emotional identity sits underneath everything you attract, create, and allow. When you stay calm, you become aware of your power. You realize that your thoughts are not random, your emotions are not meaningless, your energy is not insignificant. You begin to see that everything you project is a form of communication. Calmness sends a clear message: I am ready, I am aligned, I am available. And it is from this state that life can more easily deliver what belongs with you. The universe does not simply respond to words, it responds to coherence. You can say you trust, but if the body is clenched and the mind is frantic, the message is mixed. You can say you are ready, but if your emotions are anchored in fear, the signal remains contradictory. Calmness removes contradiction. It brings thoughts and feelings into harmony. It creates coherence, and life responds to coherence with remarkable precision. This is why the moment you become genuinely calm, things often begin shifting. People appear, opportunities open, solutions arise, the path clears. Life reorganizes itself around your new way of being. You did not force it, you did not chase it, you aligned with it. So stay calm, stay open, stay available. Release the urgency that keeps you out of the present. Release the doubt that disconnects you from what may already be yours. Release the fear that blocks the flow of receiving. Calmness is not the absence of action, it is the presence of alignment. You choose clarity over chaos, trust over fear, coherence over confusion. And in doing so, you choose to live in the kind of inner state from which what belongs to you can finally reach you. When you finally understand that calmness is not passive, but a powerful signal that aligns you with what already belongs to you energetically, you naturally come to the next realization. The more you try to force life, the more it seems to resist you. And the moment you stop pushing, stop gripping, stop trying to control every detail, life begins to move in your favor. What calmness opens, surrender accelerates. The truth is that many people have been conditioned to believe that effort alone creates results, that pushing harder makes things flow, that controlling every detail leads to success. But life does not respond to force in the way the fearful mind imagines. Force is the energy of fear, scarcity, and survival. When you try to force an outcome, your whole system tightens, the breath shortens, the mind races, the jaw locks, the chest contracts. The nervous system shifts into defense. In that state, your energy becomes narrow, chaotic, and incoherent. And when your energy is incoherent, you cannot receive clear guidance. You cannot see new opportunities. You cannot access the larger field of possibility that surrounds you at every moment. Forcing is the emotional signature of a person who believes they are separate from what they desire. But you do not need to force what is already aligned with you. You need to become available to it. This is why forcing always feels so hard. It is effort against the grain. It is the strain of trying to make life obey fear. And if you look closely at the moments in your life when everything felt stuck, heavy, resistant, and exhausting, you will almost always find the same pattern underneath: resistance. Not just mental resistance, but full-bodied resistance. It shows up in the shoulders, the stomach, the throat, the heartbeat, the breath. Your entire system begins to communicate contraction. Instead of radiating outward, your energy pulls inward and collapses. It becomes the frequency of limitation. And in that state, no matter how much you think, worry, or strategize, nothing truly flows. Resistance is the opposite of creation. Forcing outcomes is a survival response, not a creative one. Survival tries to control the external world so the inner world can feel safe. Creation aligns the inner world so the external world can reorganize around that coherence. In survival, you try to push the river. In creation, you learn to move with it. When the nervous system is locked in stress, the body believes it is under threat. It does not matter whether the threat is physically present or simply imagined in your fear of the future. The chemistry is still the same. In this state, the brain loses coherence. The heart becomes dysregulated. Intuition becomes faint. There is no room for synchronicity because your system is too closed to notice what is subtle. Forcing is what you do when you do not trust. You force because you fear that nothing will happen unless you make it happen. You force because you secretly believe you are alone. You force because you think your timing is wiser than life's. You force because your mind is still living in the old story, the story that says you must struggle to receive. But life is not moved by pressure, it is moved by openness. When you finally let go, when you stop gripping outcomes so tightly, when you allow space to return to your energy, something remarkable begins to happen. Life starts sending possibilities you could never have created through force. Letting go is not giving up. It is giving life room to work. Synchronicity is the language of alignment. It is how the field speaks when you are open enough to listen and relaxed enough to receive. These moments cannot find you easily when you are tense, stressed, and energetically contracted. They arise more clearly when your nervous system moves from survival into trust. The moment trust enters the body, the energy begins expanding again. The breath deepens, the chest softens, awareness widens, heart and mind begin to synchronize. You shift out of reaction and back into intuition. This is where flow begins. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you stop blocking what was always trying to reach you. Life flows when you flow. The moment you stop forcing outcomes, you create emotional spaciousness. And spaciousness is what allows new opportunities to emerge. Just as water cannot fill a container that is sealed shut, life cannot deliver what is yours until you open. Think of a river. It does not panic at a bend. It does not argue with rocks. It does not force itself in a straight line. It moves, adapts, curves, and continues. Its power is not in rigidity, it is in fluidity. Water is soft, yet it shapes canyons. It is yielding, yet it carries immense force. It does not dominate, it flows. And when you learn to embody that same fluidity, you stop fighting reality and start moving with it. Then you discover the difference between desperate action and inspired action. Desperate action comes from fear. It carries the feeling that if you do not act now, everything will collapse. Inspired action comes from alignment. It feels clear, timely, precise. Desperate action is heavy, chaotic, and draining. Inspired action is direct, energizing, and often strangely simple. Desperate action is noise. Inspired action is signal. And the thing that shifts you from one to the other is not more effort, it is your state of being. When your energy relaxes, your nervous system resets. When the nervous system shifts into trust, the world around you begins to respond differently. Life starts organizing itself in ways you could not have predicted by force. The right people appear, resources begin to move, ideas arrive. Timing becomes clear without so much micromanagement. This is what happens when you stop forcing. You allow life to move again. Flow is natural. Force is learned. Children do not force life. They play, they explore, they follow curiosity. They move with what is in front of them. Adults, by contrast, often learn to tighten, control, and panic. They learn to distrust the unknown. But the unknown is precisely where possibility lives. When you release the need to control the unknown, you open the door to a future greater than anything your old fearful mind could have arranged. The nervous system is central to this transition. When you shift from stress to ease, from contraction to openness, your whole energy recalibrates, awareness sharpens, intuition strengthens, your field expands. You begin to sense life's rhythm instead of constantly bracing against it. And in that rhythm, much that once felt difficult begins to feel more navigable. You notice the right book at the right time, the unexpected conversation that opens a new door, the idea that arrives without struggle. These things were not absent before. You were simply too contracted to receive them. So the path is not to force life harder. It is to become calm enough, open enough, and trusting enough that what belongs to you can finally find its way in. When you begin to understand this, another profound truth becomes visible. Calmness is not only what allows you to receive, it is what allows you to recognize who you are when you are no longer trapped in survival. Most people live so long in urgency that they mistake tension for identity. They think the constant mental noise, the tight chest, the restless need to make things happen is simply who they are. But that is not your nature. That is your conditioning. That is the residue of fear living in the body. And once calmness enters deeply enough, you begin to experience something unusual. Yourself, without the distortion, you begin to notice how much of your former life was driven not by truth, but by reaction. Reaction to uncertainty, reaction to old wounds, reaction to imagined loss, reaction to the belief that if you stopped pushing, everything would fall apart. But life was never asking you to carry it through force. It was asking you to align with it. This is why surrender feels so strange at first. To the nervous system trained in struggle, surrender can feel like danger. If I stop gripping, who will protect me? If I stop controlling, what will hold me? If I stop rehearsing disaster, how will I be ready? But these questions come from the old survival self, the self that has confused vigilance with intelligence. And the deeper truth is that vigilance has often kept you disconnected from the very thing you need most, trust. Trust is not naive. It is not pretending difficulty does not exist. It is the inner decision to stop creating from fear and start relating to life from a more coherent place. Once you do this, you start to see how much unnecessary suffering was being generated by anticipation alone. The mind projected lack, and the body obeyed. The mind imagined separation, and the heart tightened. The mind rehearsed being unsupported, and the nervous system moved into defense. Yet much of what you feared never arrived, and what did arrive was often met with more strength than the fearful mind could imagine in advance. This is why calmness becomes such a radical form of power. It is not only the absence of panic, it is the restoration of accurate perception. From calmness you can finally see what belongs to you and what is only an old emotional echo. You can tell the difference between intuitive guidance and anxious compulsion. You can feel whether an action is truly yours or whether it is simply a reflex driven by fear of not being enough, not being fast enough, not being chosen in time. This discernment is priceless. It is what separates creation from survival. Survival acts to escape discomfort. Creation acts from alignment. Survival is always checking, forcing, managing, doubting. Creation listens, receives, moves when movement is true, and rests when rest is true. And because of this, creation has a very different quality of power. It is not noisy. It is not frantic. It does not need to prove itself every second. It carries its own quiet authority. Think about how different your decisions feel when they come from a calm state. There is less confusion, less desperation, less need to justify. The next step appears not as a panic response, but as something obvious, almost simple. This is one of the greatest misunderstandings people have about alignment. They imagine it will feel mystical, dramatic, extraordinary. But often it feels like relief, like returning to what was always clear beneath the noise. When you are calm, you do not need to force clarity. Clarity emerges because the interference has lessened. This is why so many powerful shifts happen only after people stop trying so hard. The answer arrives in the shower. The right person appears after they stop obsessing. The opportunity opens after they release the timeline. The insight comes after the mind gives up its constant interrogation. None of this is accidental. It is the natural law of openness. Life can only pour into what is not clenched shut. And this brings us to an even deeper layer. Calmness is not only how you receive what you desire, It is how you become the person who can hold it. Many people say they want more love, more abundance, more opportunity, more peace. But if those things arrived into a body, still organized around fear, the person would not be able to sustain them. They would mistrust love, sabotage abundance, overthink opportunity, and turn peace into another thing to protect anxiously. This is why inner state matters so much. Calmness is not just about attracting, it is about becoming stable enough to keep what is aligned. It is about building an emotional identity that no longer immediately collapses into lack whenever something good appears. The calm person does not merely receive differently, they relate differently. They do not instantly grip, cling, or panic. They can let the new thing breathe. They can stay open long enough for reality to deepen. This is how a new life is actually built, not by forcing more from the old emotional pattern, but by dissolving the old pattern enough that something new can finally take root. So if you want to know what calmness really offers, it is not just comfort, it is transformation. It interrupts the old cycle at the level where the old cycle begins, in the nervous system, in the body, in the emotional identity, in the quiet assumptions you carry about what is possible for you. When those assumptions begin to change,